With you on, I do want to ask you this. I know it's a complex subject, but there's an obvious question. New teachers may be trained to teach at both primary and secondary schools to help smooth the path for children between layers of education. Nikki Kay says the proposal is part of an important discussion about flexibility. The Education Council proposes developing programs to train new teachers to teach across different ranges of year levels. For example, you might be a teacher who covers primary, intermediate and early secondary, and it would open up opportunities for teachers, or even for early childhood teachers moving into or gliding into primary teaching, that kind of arrangement. Michael, does this sound like a good idea?
It's one of the best ideas I've heard for years and years and years and years and years. When I was a high school principal, Jim, a long way back, I used to actively recruit primary school teachers because they were very, very good classroom managers. They were good young person managers, and they could pick up subject content very quickly because they were bright people. But it was the teaching skills I was looking for. Now, I happen to believe that we've got far too many artificial divisions or transitions, as we call them in the trade, in education now, from early childhood to school to intermediate to whatever else, and it's this big broken staircase. And the research shows that every time a child or a young person goes through one of these transitions, they go backwards for a while. I've always believed the best possible school for a New Zealand city would be an area school. Now, we regard those as remote, rural solutions to widespread populations. I've believed for decades now that they are the best solution for suburban city New Zealand, because they create pathways for the kids which they can see right through. They require the multi-school teachers that Nikki Kay and you have just been talking about, and I can't wait to see it happen.
Okay, so why not run schools from year 1 to year 13? If seamless transitions and those pathways you talk about are wanted, why do we have primary, middle and secondary?
Oh, because we've got the physical structure set up that way, and the schools are relatively isolated. Now, that's not always true. You can go to Mount Roskill and you can see that great big greater campus there, which includes all the levels of schooling plus early childhood.
Yeah.
And you can go to area schools like Mount Aspiring down here at Wanaka, which is right next door to a brand new primary school. And they've got pathways right through both campuses, literally pathways as well as learning pathways. So that community is well served. But otherwise, we've got primary schools dotted through our suburbs, intermediate schools scattered here and there, and then, of course, various forms of secondary school. We've got the most incredibly complicated structural schooling system. And if this proposal can sort it out or start to sort it out, I'll be a very, very happy bloke.
Which it sounds like it. And you broadly agree with this?
Yeah, look, I think it's showing initiative, and I think it's always good to look at new ideas. I mean, my parents taught at Vanish College in Christchurch, which was the school for the deaf at the time, and it was a boarding school for kids from 5 to high school. So
That's right.
I actually lived on that campus and grew up there, so that was where we come from.
You'd think it would save money too,
No.
if you condensed schooling into campuses like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course it would. Yep.
Instead of dotting around all through the landscape, as Michael says. Michael Deacon, lovely to have you on the panel again.
Yeah, very good, Jim. Thank you. And thank you, Leonie, too. Good to talk with you.
And
You too.
Leonie Freeman. Thanks, Leonie, as Michael said.
Thanks, Jim.
We are back tomorrow, and Checkpoint coming right up.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, Todd Barclay makes Gone by Lunchtime a reality. Chris Bramwell on his lunchtime announcement and his constituents at lunchtime on what they make of it. Also tonight, the Education Ministry apologises for its flawed handling of school closures and mergers after the 2011 Canterbury earthquake. Another building in Auckland CBD with fire safety problems. The father of a Hamilton man shot dead by police calls for body cameras for all frontline police officers. And an elderly Wellington couple win an apology from the council after spending over a decade dodging poo in their backyard. Do join us, Checkpoint, after the news at 5.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The Prime Minister did not ask Todd Barclay to resign from Parliament or talk to him about pulling his candidacy for this year's election. Mr Barclay has been under pressure to resign after controversy over secret recordings he's accused of making of a staffer in the Gore electorate office. That staff member resigned last year and received a payout as part of a confidentiality agreement. Yesterday, Bill English went public with a statement he made to police early last year in which he said Mr Barclay had personally told him he had left a dictaphone in the office. Mr English was asked if he'd had any regrets about how he acted.
My main regret here is that people that I know well fell out so badly, and it's been an ongoing problem in different forms. It's a shame that it's ended up in this situation.
Bill English says Todd Barclay has made the right decision to leave. The selection for the Balclutha Southland candidate will now be reopened. The Chief Ombudsman has told the Education Ministry to apologise for the way it treated schools following the 2011 Canterbury quake. Peter Bosher recommended the apology in a critical report tabled in Parliament this afternoon. Mr Bosher says the Ministry consulted schools over broad plans for the future of education in Christchurch, but at the same time ran a secret program with specific plans for individual schools.
The Ministry decided to adopt a parallel process and didn't properly engage the community in that. The result was like a bombshell when schools were told that many of them were going to be closed. So it really wasn't a good process on any view of the matter.
Peter Bosher says the Ministry's apology is important for 38 schools that were told the Ministry wanted to close or merge them. Staff are being moved out of Napier's civic building and library immediately because earthquake tests have revealed the buildings are unsafe. The Napier City Council says it was presented with seismic tests this week showing that both buildings have structural problems. Engineers say the civic building, which includes the council's chambers and mayor's office, is unlikely to be fixed or refurbished. The library building, which also includes the Inland Revenue Department branch, will now be strengthened. The mother of Akshay Chand has told a coroner's inquest that she believed her son was better after being released on bail and put on antidepressants. Suchita Chand has given evidence at the inquest into the death of 18-year-old Christy Maro, the teenager her son killed while out on bail for kidnapping her at knife point. Mrs Chand agreed under cross-examination that she and her sister agreed to keep an eye on her son while he was out on bail. She later said she didn't believe that would extend to one of them staying awake and literally watching him. Mrs Chand told the inquest that she'd earlier hidden the family's kitchen knives in a compartment inside the oven. But a week before Miss Maro was killed, her son was on medication and she believed he was doing better. A month after getting bail, Akshay Chand stabbed Christy Maro to death in November 2011. The father of a man killed by police in Hamilton last year is calling for all frontline officers to wear body cameras. 36-year-old Nicholas Marshall was shot after police raided a warehouse he was living in looking for firearms and drugs. The Independent Police Conduct Authority has found the police action was justified. Nelson Marshall says cameras would provide an accurate account.
So that we can see, and they can see, and anybody else can see what exactly happened. At the moment, it's not the old story about three sides to every story. You've got theirs, yours, and the truth. Which one's right?
Nelson Marshall says cameras would provide checks and balances. A pilot has escaped unharmed after miraculously landing his burning helicopter in a clearing near Taupo. The helicopter caught fire while flying over Puriora Forest just west of Lake Taupo. Despite losing power, the pilot managed to steer the aircraft to a nearby clearing. He was spotted and picked up by a rescue helicopter following the flight path at about 2 o'clock this afternoon after the aircraft's emergency location beacon and tracking system both malfunctioned. The Civil Aviation Authority is investigating the crash. It's 5:04. In sport, despite an underwhelming effort in their opening Confederations Cup match, All Whites coach Anthony Hudson remains optimistic ahead of their match against Mexico tomorrow morning in Sochi. New Zealand lost 2-0 to hosts Russia in their opening match and need at least a draw against Mexico to remain in contention for the semi-finals. Hudson says captain and striker Chris Wood has been a standout player, but he needs support.
We're not going to be successful based upon one or two superstars. We have to be incredibly together, incredibly hard-working, and I think in the last game, for sure, we showed that in the second half that we were a team. We hope and we are focused on nothing but making sure that that happens tomorrow, and I have every faith that it will happen.
Anthony Hudson. The Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic face the prospect of missing out on netball's playoffs for the first time in their history when they play the Northern Stars in their last ANZ Premiership round-robin game tonight. The Magic need to win by at least 15 goals to pip the Northern Mystics for the third and final playoff spot. The Magic or the Mystics will play the Central Pulse this weekend, with the winner of that game to play the Southern Steel in next week's grand final. And Canterbury will defend rugby's Ranfurly Shield for the first time this season against Whanganui tonight. Canterbury took the Shield from Waikato in September and held on to it for in their one challenge from North Harbour at the end of last season. Whanganui have never held the Shield. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, David Coles, master paint maker, talking about pigments and the weird and wonderful ingredients behind some of the colours in our lives, at least the ones nature didn't paint for us. Linda Changwai Earl flies solo with Warren, bringing up a family on his own. And this week's overseas correspondent Lian Huang is on the line from Vietnam, which was recently on the line to the White House. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel. Showers turning to rain later today or overnight with heavy falls, northeast gales and possible thunderstorms. Rain and winds easing late tomorrow. Bay of Plenty in Gisborne. A few showers today, turning to rain tomorrow with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms. Waikato to Taranaki and Taupo. Clouds spreading south today and rain developing tomorrow. Whanganui to Wellington, also Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Marlborough. Fine today with high cloud later, rain spreading south tomorrow. Nelson and Buller, cloud increasing today and scattered rain developing tomorrow. Westland and Fiordland, rain with heavy falls, clearing tomorrow. Canterbury to Southland, high cloud, rain developing late today, easing to isolated showers in the south tomorrow and snow lowering to 600 metres. The Chatham Islands, cloudy with drizzle tomorrow. It's coming up to 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks so much, Katrina. Coming up on the program tonight, the Education Ministry apologises for its handling of school closures and mergers in Christchurch after the 2011 earthquakes. Everyone who was there at the time will remember this very well. Another building in downtown Auckland that's had fire safety issues. And the father of a Hamilton man shot dead by police is calling for body cameras for all frontline police officers. But we begin tonight with striking evidence that 24 hours really is a long time in politics. This time last night, embattled National Party MP Todd Barclay made a brief and qualified apology for misleading statements. Then he walked off from a stunned media pack without taking any questions. We put it live to air, and it's fair to say almost everyone was surprised by the extent to which a resignation didn't appear to be imminent. But just after lunch today, after what have clearly been robust discussions behind closed doors in the Beehive, the 27-year-old Balclutha Southland MP released a statement effectively chucking in his political career. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
Todd Barclay has been under pressure to resign after controversy over secret recordings he's accused of making of a staffer in the Gore electorate office. The staffer, Glenys Dixon, resigned last year and received a payout as part of a confidentiality agreement. But it was yesterday that Mr Barclay was forced to apologise for making statements about the matter that put him at odds with the Prime Minister. Bill English says he didn't speak to Mr Barclay about leaving Parliament or ask him to resign. He was asked whether anyone in his office put any pressure on the first-term MP to leave.
Look, he discussed the issue with a whole lot of people, including senior colleagues. That's exactly what you would expect. I didn't discuss it with him, and he's made a decision which I think for a young man it's a very difficult decision, but it's the right one, and I think it comes from him understanding that the way these circumstances have evolved just put him in a very difficult position.
Neither the Prime Minister nor anyone in the party can force an MP to resign, but they can convince them to go, which is what's likely to have happened. National goes into its annual conference this weekend, and with the election just 3 months away, the party will have been keen to see this matter dealt with quickly. Mr English says he doesn't think it's been damaging for National.
These sorts of issues arise commonly in politics, and this one has been dealt with, I think, pretty decisively, principally because of the decision by Mr Barclay to stand down.
In Parliament, just minutes later, the Labour Party leader Andrew Little turned the spotlight firmly onto Mr English and his handling of the matter.
Is it an acceptable moral standard for the former Finance Minister to say on Radio New Zealand on the 1st of March 2016 that he was not aware of any specific problems between Mr Barclay and his former staff, when in fact he was aware that Todd Barclay had recorded Glenys Dixon?
After some objections to the question from National's Leader of the House, the Speaker finally ruled that Mr English had to answer.
Well, Mr Speaker, at the time the matter was under investigation, and in fact the facts of it had not been established, despite some of them covered by a confidential employment settlement to which I was not a party, and they were under investigation by the police. And at the time I was not sure what I could or couldn't say about that.
Andrew Little had another go.
Given that according to the former Prime Minister, former Finance Minister Bill English, quotes, just said a couple of his former staff members had left, that was it, end quotes, is it acceptable that he covered up this incident from the Prime Minister?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, allegations of a cover-up are ridiculous. The statements made to me regarding this were reported to the relevant party official, that's on the record, and then to the police. It's a weird world where the Labor Party says that reporting a matter to the police is a cover-up.
Also in question time, the Green Party co-leader James Shaw asked the Police Minister Paula Bennett whether the electorate staff member who claims she was secretly recorded was threatened in any way.
Has she or any other minister, including Bill English, discouraged police from investigating the allegations that a National Party board member threatened Glenys Dixon and encouraged her to drop the complaint against Todd Barclay?
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
As the Minister of Police, they have statutory independence. I know of no such incidences, so no.
The Senior Cabinet Minister, Judith Collins, says it's a sad day, and she's been keeping in touch with Todd Barclay over the last couple of days.
Todd's phoned me a couple of times, and I've just given him the support I would to any colleague who is going through tough times. But I'm very aware he's a very, very young man to be in a place like this, and it's really tough politics.
Other senior colleagues and support party leaders also felt for Todd Barclay.
It's a sad decision for him, but I think the right one.
Would have thought that he had a long parliamentary career before him serving his country, and now that's not true. I just hope he's got other chapters in front of him.
I sent him a text saying tough day at the office, because I think you should support people at a human level, but ultimately what he did was wrong.
Really, really tough decision for him. A really sad day.
Todd Barclay himself was lying low at Parliament today, where he'll remain until the general election. The National Party will now have to reopen for nominations for the safe blue seat of Balclutha Southland. Atu i te whare parimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Chris Bramwell ahau.
The National Party's former Balclutha Southland chair, who resigned over the actions of Todd Barclay, says the electorate needs an MP with integrity. But Stuart Davies says he doesn't take any delight in how things have unfolded.
It doesn't give me any pleasure to watch what's unfolding. I'm pleased that it's coming out. It's a huge relief to me, actually, to be quite honest. But I don't take any delight in throwing people under the bus. People have rung in support and said, look, we're pleased that it's out now, and that they're acknowledging, actually, Glenys's courage in stepping forward. At the end of the day, people down this end of the world, are people with integrity. So they deserve someone with honesty and integrity and their feet on the ground, I think.
Stuart Davey, as was the case last night, we received a no to all our interview requests on this affair today. Bill English and Todd Barclay, no and no. The National Party President, Peter Goodfellow, no. And the police, no. All those invitations stand. Any of those people are welcome to join us between now and 6:30 tonight. So what did Todd Barclay's constituents think? Well, shortly after the news of his resignation broke, we called a cafe in Balclutha. Now, in our main centres, this probably wouldn't work. But in Balclutha, the staff and patrons happily passed the phone around as we did a lunchtime survey. First customer, Christine.
I think it's unfortunate, but it's probably the best call.
Did you vote for him?
No, I didn't.
What do you think of what you've learned over the past couple of days?
It's really unfortunate that things like that happen, and it's just unfortunate in the way it's come out.
Yeah, it's been a funny old business, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Are there other people around you, Christina? Are there other customers nearby? Other patrons at this cafe?
Yes, there are.
Can you pass me to someone?
Sure.
Christine, it's lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's nice southern manners.
Hello, Kylie speaking.
Kylie, it's John Campbell speaking. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Good, yeah, good. What are you having for lunch?
Cheese rolls, good old southern cheese rolls.
Oh, yeah, I'm a bit envious of that.
That's awesome.
Have you heard about Todd Barclay?
I have.
And what do you make of it?
I guess it's just, it's a shame that he's done something like this. But being human, obviously, he's made a bit of an error. But I guess resigning, at least he's made a stand and said what I've done is wrong.
So the right thing to do, do you think?
I think so, because it's very hard to earn trust again once it's gone. Yeah.
Well, it's lovely to talk to you. Enjoy those cheese rolls. I'm very envious. Thank you, Kylie. Can you pass me? Is there anyone else nearby you?
Yes, there is. I'll just pass you over.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Dougal Harding speaking.
Is it Dougal?
That's the one.
Dougal, it's John Campbell speaking. How are you, Dougal?
I'm good.
Dougal, what do you make of Todd Barclay is deciding to stand down and not seek re-election?
It's all still developing. I tend not to get too head up about these things until you have all of the information. It's probably the right thing to do, and it certainly wasn't a good look.
Hello.
Hello, who's this?
Peter Dawson speaking.
Peter Dawson, it's John Campbell speaking from Radio New Zealand. How are you, Peter?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. What are you having for lunch?
Me, I'm just about to have a burger. Yeah, me and my wife.
A burger. That's a prop. Oh, yeah, a burger. You're a good man. That's a beautiful you've got going on there. Did you vote for Todd Barclay?
I did in the last election. Yeah, I did.
And would you have voted for him again after what you've learnt in the past couple of days?
Oh, no, not at all. I think what's happened was inevitable at the end of the day. Like, I just can't. That press secretary that worked for Bill English for 18 years, she resigned. Or you don't resign for. I think he just got to. If he's got any balls, he should just come out and tell the public what's actually happened. Yeah.
Here's Mr. Wise. He'd like to talk to you too, John.
Mr.
Wise.
Mr. Wise?
He's our best customer.
Okay, yay. Is he? Thanks, Jody.
John.
Mr. Wise, how are you?
I'm very well, sir.
You're good. Lovely to talk to you. You're their best customer, Jody was saying.
I am not. Mind you, I do get a couple of hugs every time I walk in. So.
A couple of hugs?
Yep.
Oh, that doesn't happen on Ponsonby Road. That's very nice. Go Balclutha.
My word. Warm heart and hot coffee.
Oh, yeah, that sounds lovely.
Listen, why am I talking to you?
Well, you're talking to me about Todd Barclay and his decision not to seek re-election. So he's just announced he's going to stand down at the forthcoming election, which is in September, of course. What do you think about that?
I think it's a very sensible thing on his behalf. Too much prevarication and whatnot. And if I can get a lick in here, he's a reformed cigarette seller, and I don't smoke.
Right. So you weren't much of a fan to start with?
No, not at all. Very little. A fast talker and whatnot is not necessarily a good politician.
Well, it's lovely to talk to you, Mr. Wise.
Sorry about that.
And we can make a little comment too. They said this morning the waxeyes are a dying breed. Don't believe it. I've got about 150 sitting on the deck every morning.
You have not. What do you feed them?
Sugar and water.
Oh,
like politicians.
It's really nice to talk to you. Go and have another hug.
Okay, I
Okay.
shall. I'll demand it. Thanks for that. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. And if you've ever contemplated moving to Balclutha, we think that is a very fine advertisement to the town. Thank you to all of the people in that cafe who simply passed the phone around and spoke to us. The overwhelming consensus of the people that we spoke to in that cafe and that our reporters have been speaking to in the electorate is that Todd Barclay did indeed do the right thing. We'll hear more from our reporters in the area later. The Education Ministry has been forced to apologise for its flawed handling of school closures and mergers after the 2011 Canterbury earthquake. The Chief Ombudsman recommended the apology in a critical report tabled in Parliament this afternoon. It says the Ministry blindsided people by proposing the closure and merger of 38 schools in September 2012. This was a very big deal in Christchurch at the time, of course, and caused a lot of stress. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen filed this report.
The Chief Ombudsman, Peter Boscher, says the Ministry was consulting Christchurch schools on the broad future of education in the city in 2011 and 2012. But he says unbeknown to the schools, the Ministry was also making more specific plans with the government.
The Ministry decided to adopt a parallel process and didn't properly engage the community in that. The result was like a bombshell when schools were told that many of them were going to be closed. So it really wasn't a good process on any view of the matter.
Peter Boscher says today's apology is important for the 38 schools the Ministry said should close or merge.
It was a bombshell. They were gobsmacked by news which they weren't ready for, and that sort of thing hurts. When you receive a body blow like this, you almost go into shock mode. And I think that the apology goes a long way in restoring justice.
The Secretary for Education, Iona Holstead, says the Ministry knew at the time it had mishandled the situation and it has previously privately apologised to the schools involved. She says the separate process the Ministry was working on involved developing specific plans with the government that it would then take to the community for consultation.
The failure was that we did not make it explicit to the people of Christchurch that we were having to do that as part of an ordinary government process. It's a budget process. And it's probably fair to say that public servants treat budget processes as secret processes because that's what they are.
Iona Holstead says the Ministry would do things differently now.
In any circumstances now, we would be much more transparent about telling people not what we're telling government, but we would tell them that we're in a process to define an indicative business case, for example.
Iona Holstead says a formal apology to the schools will be published in the Christchurch Press newspaper on Saturday. Margaret Trotter is the principal of Oakland School in Horswell and the president of the Canterbury Primary Principals Association. She says the Ministry could have apologised before the Chief Ombudsman released his report.
Probably a little bit too late. We have been saying as a sector for quite a while now that there were some huge mistakes made. As you say, it's waited to the Ombudsman before we've had that recognition.
Margaret Trotter says some schools in Christchurch are still in the process of shifting to new sites as a result of the quake, and it's important they're properly consulted on that change. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
If you're in Christchurch, we'd love your feedback on this. Text us 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. 5:23. The mother of Akshay Chand says she just wanted her son home on bail and had no idea that he would kill Christy Marceau. Suchita Chand has given evidence at the inquest into the death of the 18-year-old, her son stabbed to death. She told the inquest at the Auckland District Court that she and her sister had agreed to supervise her son while he was out on bail for kidnapping Miss Marceau at knife point. A month later, Akshay Chand stabbed Miss Marceau to death at her family home, just a 2-minute walk away from his bail address. Our court reporter Eddie Gay, who does such a brilliant job of covering these harrowing cases, Eddie, was in court. Mrs. Chan was at court for several bail hearings, was she?
That's right. I think it's 4 in total.
Right.
She initially told the inquest today that she couldn't remember having discussions with her son's lawyer, Marianne Lowe, about her and her sister supervising her son 24 hours, 7 days a week if he got bail. However, during cross-examination from Miss Lowe's lawyer, Stuart Grieve QC, she confirmed that she had given such an undertaking to the lawyer. At one point, the Chan's lawyer, Alex Witten-Hanna, pointed out that adult supervision wasn't actually one of the conditions of bail. Mrs. Chan said she was never consulted by the police or the court. She had nothing in writing about what her responsibilities were. She confirmed to the lawyer assisting the coroner, Hannah Janes, that she was bewildered and stressed to have her son in court. She said that no one was there to help her and clarify what her responsibilities were once her son got bail.
Mrs. Chan had concerns for her safety, right?
That's right, and that of her daughter. She told the inquest that she actually hid the knives, the family kitchen knives, in a compartment in the oven. And in the week before her son killed Miss Maro, she told the court that she left one of the knives out because she believed her son was feeling better. She also confirmed she was aware how close the Maros lived close by. Under questioning from Coroner Catherine Grieg, Mrs. Chan said she believed her son would be better after being on antidepressants on this medication that he was put on after being released on bail. She said she couldn't read her son's mind, but she said she had no idea he'd be able to do what he did. The inquest heard how a month after getting bail, Chan took that 2-minute walk around the corner to the Maro's house.
Also heard from was Shale Chan, who's Akshay's sister.
Yeah, that's right. Shale said that she was terrified for her own safety. That's what she told the police in a statement. She said that today at the inquest that she spent as many nights as possible at her friends' homes around the area. The inquestors heard that the judge who granted Chan bail was told Miss Chan was a university student who was another sort of, adult figure at the house who could help supervise her brother. But Miss Chan says she was still at high school at the time, 17 years old, finishing up her, I believe it was her Year 12 exams. She described on the morning in November 2011 finding her brother gone from the family house. She knew her brother was on this 24-hour curfew and that he wasn't in the house, and she phoned her mother straight away at work.
Inquest continuing?
That's right, yep.
Edward Gay, thank you. Really appreciate it, Eddie. Authorities have released the dashboard camera footage from the shooting of Philando Castile, a black motorist, by Officer Geronimo Yanez in July 2016. It comes just days after the officer was acquitted of manslaughter. Acquitted. Nathan Frandino from Reuters reports, and a warning, and it's an important one. If you're watching, some viewers, in fact many I suspect, will find the pictures disturbing.
The newly released dashcam video shows what first appears to be a standard traffic stop. St. Anthony police officer Geronimo Yanez pulling over black motorist Philando Castile on a Minnesota freeway in July 2016.
And on this one back here.
But when Castile reveals he's carrying a firearm, tensions escalate.
Sir, I have to tell you, I do have a firearm on me.
Don't reach for it then. Don't pull it out. Don't pull it out.
Yanez shot Castile 5 times. He later testified during his trial for second-degree manslaughter that he feared for his life after Castile began reaching for a firearm. That alleged action could not be seen in the footage. Yanez was found not guilty.
He killed my boyfriend.
The aftermath of the encounter was also broadcast on social media. Castile's girlfriend Diamond Reynolds recorded the incident from the passenger seat.
And he let the officer know that he had a firearm and he was reaching for his wallet, and the officer just shot him in his arm.
Castile's family plans to file a civil lawsuit in federal court.
Nathan Frandino from Reuters, a reminder that that officer was acquitted of manslaughter. It's 5:28. The Wellington City Council has apologised to an elderly couple who've been forced to walk a plank to escape raw sewage in their backyard during heavy rain. Patricia and Pat O'Neill have spent almost 20 years battling poo every time they need to leave their state home in Strathmore Park in a downpour. But as Adriana Webber reports, that is finally about to change.
A keen gardener, 86-year-old Patricia O'Neill wanted nothing more than to spend her retirement in her front yard. But instead of picking flowers, she's been picking toilet paper covered in sewage for the past 17 years. The problem lies with a wastewater manhole at the back of the property next door. It sits on a slight hill, and every time there's a downpour it overflows, sending a torrent of the sewage water straight into Mrs O'Neill's back and front yards.
It's just sludge, thick sludge, horrible. Faeces mixed up with urine, you know, plus toilet paper. Mate, we go around the lawn and have to pick it up. It's in the garden, on the lawn. You should sort of pick out of there sometimes with gloves on. It's revolting, revolting.
She says sometimes the wastewater would get as high as 1/2 metre, making it hard for her to leave the house.
My husband used to put 3 planks from the bottom step to the gate so that I could pull the slacks up and wade through it to the car. But we don't do that now. We just, if we've got a doctor's appointment, we'll ring up and cancel it, and we're stuck inside here.
Mrs O'Neill says she exhausted all avenues to try to fix the problem, going to the Council, Housing New Zealand, Wellington Water and other agencies to get help. But it's only recently that the wheels have been put in motion to fix the problem. A Wellington City Council spokesman, Richard McLean, says a communication error is likely to blame for the delay.
Maybe in the past they have managed to talk to people at the City Council or at Housing New Zealand, but there clearly has been a breakdown in communication if that's happened, because our formal records only tell us that we were called after some very, very heavy rain last November.
Mr McLean says the council is looking at its record keeping with Housing New Zealand and Wellington Water to see whether the couple's complaints had been properly logged. He says staff have now bolted down the manhole lid to stop it from overflowing, and engineers will urgently work to find a more permanent solution to the problem.
If indeed this problem has been just happening regularly for the past 17 years, I mean, everyone agrees that that's completely unacceptable, which is why we are putting our engineers on the task now.
The council has apologised to Mr and Mrs O'Neill, and Housing New Zealand has offered the couple a home while a permanent solution is worked on. But Patricia O'Neill isn't entirely convinced and says she still doesn't know how much longer she'll have to wait to tend to a sewage-free garden. For Checkpoint, Adriana Webber.
Thank you for being with us on Checkpoint. Coming up, the father of a Hamilton man shot dead by police is calling for body cameras on all frontline officers. In Auckland, building owners spent a year fixing fire safety problems. The Health Minister defends his embattled ministry following the $38 million budget blunder. 34-6 against the Chiefs. The BBC's Chris Jones on the rise and rise of the Lions. How far will they rise? Plus Anusha Bradley with business news, but with the time at 28 minutes to 6. Almost exactly. Here's Katrina with the headlines.
The Prime Minister did not ask Todd Barclay to resign from Parliament or talk to him about pulling out of this year's election. Mr Barclay has decided not to stand for Balclutha Southland after coming under pressure because of controversy over secret recordings he's accused of making in his Gore electorate office. The Chief Ombudsman has told the Education Ministry to apologise for the way it treated some Christchurch schools after the 2011 Canterbury quake. Peter Boscher says at the same time as it consulted schools over broad plans for the future, it ran a secret program with specific plans for individual schools. A group representing Canterbury principals says the apology could have been made sooner. The mother of Akshay Chand has told the coroner investigating Christy Marceau's killing she believed her son was better after being put on antidepressants. Suchita Chand said that she and her sister agreed to keep an eye on Chand, but didn't believe that meant staying awake and literally watching him. Mrs Chand earlier said she had hidden the family's kitchen knives, but a week before Miss Marceau was killed, her son was on medication and she believed he was doing better. The father of a man killed by police in Hamilton last year is calling for all frontline officers to wear body cameras. 36-year-old Nicholas Marshall was shot after police raided a warehouse he was living in looking for firearms and drugs. The Independent Police Conduct Authority has found the police action was justified. Nicholas Marshall's father, Nelson, says cameras would provide an accurate account. A pilot has escaped unharmed after miraculously landing his burning helicopter in a clearing near Taupō. The helicopter caught fire over Puriora Forest, and despite losing power, the pilot managed to steer it to a nearby clearing. He was picked up by a rescue helicopter this afternoon. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now with Anusha Bradley, who's beside me in the studio. Hi, Anusha. Tourism Holdings riding the tourism boom.
It is indeed. So Tourism Holdings is the biggest listed tourism company on the market. It owns tourist attractions like Waitomo Caves and a host of caravan companies like Brits. It expects its full year profit for this financial year to be 20% higher than last year, to around $29.5 million.
Gosh, it's a big rise year on year.
Yeah, well, the reason is because it's really benefiting from this record number of tourists we're having to New Zealand. It also recently bought an American rental business called El Monte, and that appears to be paying off. I spoke to the CEO, Grant Webster, today, and he admitted that it was a bit of a gamble when it bought it in December, but it's bedding down nicely, and so that is really helping their profits as well. The company has a target of making $50 million by 2020, $50 million of profits, I should say, and it's not ruling out further acquisitions to try and help reach that target.
Right. Now, I've got an interesting note here in the stuff we're going to talk about. It says New Zealand may not be as honest and corruption-free as we think we are. What's that about?
Yeah, well, according to a report by Deloitte, it surveyed New Zealand and Australian companies and found that 20% of them had detected at least one instance of corruption. And that included things like not declaring conflicts of interest, gifts or trips away, along with doing people favours or just giving excessive commissions, that kind of thing. It does sort of is at odds with Transparency International's report. They said last year that New Zealand is equal with Denmark on being the least corrupt country in the year. So who knows, maybe that will change.
Dairy prices overnight, they dipped somewhat, didn't they?
Just slightly, just a touch, 0.8% they fell. Not a lot, but there has been 6 consecutive rises before that, so analysts aren't really concerned about the dip. But what I do want to talk about with some passion is the butter price. That is quite concerning if you're an addict like me. So butter prices hit a record high overnight, and they've more than doubled in the last year. And there's a butter shortage in Europe. You may recall articles about the French protesting about the price of their croissants and things like that. And that's really due to an overall dip in global milk production and an increase in demand. But also people apparently are preferring full cream milk products, and that's taking the fat out of the supply chain.
Right.
So that's interesting. Yeah, it's good for New Zealand dairy farmers. They're getting a higher price, but not so good for
butter lovers. Exactly. What's happening on the market, Sanusha?
Yeah, a quiet market today. Everyone's waiting for the OCR review tomorrow. The Reserve Bank expects to keep interest rates on hold at 1.75%. There were some interesting big volumes changing hands in Air New Zealand shares today. There may be some profit taking. That company has gained 55% in the last year.
Wow.
It's been an outperformer, but the outlook is for slightly softer earnings, so maybe some investors are taking their money and running. The market closed down 59 points today to close at 7,527. The Australian market's down 1.3% at 5,676, and the Kiwis buying 72.17 US cents and 95.51 Australian.
Anusha Bradley in the studio, thank you so much. The time is 23 minutes to 6. The father of a Hamilton man shot dead by police is calling for body cameras for all frontline police officers. Now, 36-year-old Nicholas Marshall was killed by police after they raided his warehouse in search of drugs and firearms in July of last year. In a report out today, the Independent Police Conduct Authority, the IPCA, ruled that police were justified in shooting him because the lives of some officers were put at risk. Here's our Waikato reporter, Andrew McRae.
When armed police burst into the warehouse, Nicholas Marshall picked up a pump-action shotgun, aimed it at an officer and pulled the trigger. The weapon didn't go off, and as he was reloading, one officer fired 5 shots and another 3. Mr. Marshall was hit and died at the scene. Nelson Marshall says police may have been justified in shooting his son once he picked up the shotgun, but he questions the way they went about the raid.
We think it's not justifiable that they should put him in a situation where he felt the only way out was to pick up a gun. Did they need to send 10 armed officers in at 6 o'clock, 6:30 at night when he'd had the workshop open for most of the afternoon?
Nelson Marshall says his son reacted the way he did because he thought the mongrel mob, who he'd had problems with in the past, had come to attack him.
They were a bit unhappy with something that had happened and came in and did a home invasion early one morning. He thought that they'd come back again to finish it off.
He says if the officers had body cameras, then any dispute over what actually happened would immediately be cleared up.
If the cops had cameras, you would know. At the moment, they're not a law unto their own, but there's no checks or balances.
The police say they have no plans for the immediate introduction of body cameras. In a statement, they say that while the technology is readily available, if on-body cameras were to be considered, among the complexities that would need to be resolved would be the appropriate storage, security and management of any footage captured, which would be significant in volume. They say there are also legal and privacy considerations. Nelson Marshall questions this.
Cameras modify the behaviour of both parties. The people being attacked, if you like, for a better word, and the attacker have both know that they're on camera. Look what happens at Hamilton parking wardens started using cameras, and their assault rates dropped to net zero or near zero.
The time between the police breaking down the door at the warehouse to when Mr Marshall was shot was about 10 seconds. The Waikato Police District Commander Bruce Bird says because it was a rapidly evolving situation, other tactical options rather than shooting Mr Marshall were neither viable or appropriate.
It was quite clear that in the situation our officers found themselves in a life-threatening situation, they were justified to use force, and in this case to shoot dead Mr Marshall.
Nelson Marshall's not sure if the family will take the matter any further, but now awaits an investigation by the coroner. He says talk of a petition calling on frontline police officers to have body cameras has his full support. In Hamilton for Checkpoint, Ko Andrew McRae-Tene.
Last night we brought you a story about a dangerous building notice issued to the owners of Auckland Strand Arcade. It was deemed a dangerous building on June the 30th last year, and nearly a year on, the designation is still in effect. Now, Auckland Council told us today that if the building had been deemed unsafe for all users, it would have closed it, but it was only dangerous for certain activities, in this case the use of the food court and the use of the building for temporary backpackers accommodation. It says both were closed down and have remained closed down. It says the dangerous building notice, which we must point out is still in effect, will be removed once these issues are permanently fixed, which is the responsibility of the building owner. It could not give us a time frame for when the notice would be lifted, but says it has spoken to the fire service today and it would attend a fire if one broke out there. Well, tonight we can reveal another building in Auckland CBD which was allowed to stay open, business as usual, for more than a year while the owner fixed serious fire safety problems. The Skyworld entertainment building on Queen Street, very well known if you live in the city, had inadequate fire safety systems for 18 months. During that time, essential fire systems such as smoke alarms, smoke detectors and extractor fans weren't working. So the council asked the owner to employ fire wardens to stand in movie theatres to detect fires. Zach Fleming explains.
Any other building in this country would have been shut down.
Speaking on condition of anonymity, a man who worked on the fire protection systems at the Skyworld Entertainment Centre on Auckland's Queen Street. For more than a year, he says some of the building's smoke alarms, smoke detectors and smoke extractor fans weren't working.
There was, very importantly, a lot of work around the cinemas, which the preventive systems or the warning systems within those cinemas just weren't working or hadn't been maintained.
To put this into context, Skyworld's 7 stories house movie theatres, a bowling alley, mini golf, a games arcade, 12 retail stores, 11 restaurants and a food court. 2 million people visit every year. It's one of the busiest buildings in Auckland. And in August 2015, its warrant of fitness was rejected by Auckland Council, primarily for fire compliance issues. Then a good faith agreement was reached.
He said, yes, we cleaned the 10 to 12 inches of built-up fat out of the exhaust system so it wouldn't catch fire. We showed that we cleaned it up. We showed that we did many things to get things sorted out, but there were a list of maybe 10, 12 things that we couldn't convince James Quack to do before he needed the building warrant of fitness.
In a letter obtained by Checkpoint, James Quack, the building's owner, wrote to Auckland Council in December 2015, citing management structure issues. He said he didn't realise how non-compliant his building was.
Hey presto, building warrant of fitness arrived.
He promised to fix the remaining issues, which he estimated would cost him just $57,000. And in response, Auckland Council wrote back to him in January 2016.
The BWOF has now been accepted for the above site with the accompanying letter of explanation. We are now satisfied that a pathway to achieving compliance has been embarked upon. Please be advised that resolving issues with systems for automatic fire suppression and emergency warning is of the utmost priority and must be addressed as soon as possible. If you could please provide updates to progress in this area, this would be appreciated.
But fast forward 11 months. By the end of last year, many of those problems James Quack had promised in writing to fix weren't fixed.
There was an ultimatum. You can do these things, or you won't be able to open certain areas within that building. One of the areas was a food court, the other was a cinema.
After a year and a half of unfulfilled promises, Auckland Council designated Skyworld a dangerous building, saying that safety systems were, quote, inadequate to protect the occupants of the building in the event of a fire. The council demanded fire wardens be placed in the movie theatres to detect fires.
Hello, Skyworld.
Checkpoint made several attempts to contact owner James Quack, but he couldn't be reached for comment today.
James Quack is out of the country these days.
So he's not in New Zealand at the moment?
No. He's back to Korea for like 1 or 2 months.
Okay.
But I'm not sure when he's coming back.
The building manager, in his absence, Chad Han, was unable to find anyone who could comment on behalf. Our source says repairs did not need to take 18 months.
If you wanted to bring that building up to standard, you could in a very short space of time. Not a year, not 4 months. Something like 3 to 4 weeks is ample time if you really are intent on bringing a building up to standard.
3 fire protection and compliance companies Checkpoint spoke to today say they have pulled out of contracts with James Quack. One cited philosophical differences. The Skyworld building is now fully compliant. The dangerous building notice was lifted on the 16th of May, just under 5 months after it was issued. The council declined to be interviewed, but in a statement, its building control compliance manager Sally Gray said the council put in safety measures to ensure the safety of customers and staff until a permanent fix could be achieved. She said the council has worked with the building's owners for the past 5 months, sufficiently remediating issues so the dangerous building notice could be lifted. The building owners are now undertaking their obligations in respect to a building warrant of fitness. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
13.5 to 6. The Health Minister was forced to defend his embattled ministry in Parliament today following a major budget blunder. The ministry last month incorrectly allocated $38 million to DHBs and last Friday asked for the money back. It forced financially stretched district health boards to go back to the drawing board with their budgeting for the next financial year starting in July. Our health correspondent Karen Brown has more.
DHBs aren't commenting publicly, but they view the error as the straw that broke the camel's back when it comes to their relations with the ministry. Those have been strained for months, and DHBs feel vindicated by a recent performance assessment of the ministry's senior leadership team done by Paula Rebstock for the State Services Commission. The review, which began in February, is rumoured to be highly critical of the ministry's senior leadership team. The Commission has refused to release it, sparking questions in Parliament today from Labour's health spokesperson David Clark.
Has a recent review of the ministry been undertaken by Paula Rebstock? And if so, what were its findings?
The Minister, Jonathan Coleman, replied with a statement from the State Services Commissioner Peter Hughes.
As the State Services Commissioner has said today, and I quote, SSC started working with the Ministry of Health on a scheduled PIF review in February this year. The review is currently in progress and the review report is in the process of being drafted. Once the review report is completed, it will be published on the SSC website. This is expected to happen in the next few months.
Dr Clark wasn't keen to let it go.
How long has the Minister had a version of the report and how long does he expect to sit on it before it is released?
And so I think this question is rather premature. Be happy to answer the question when it is released, as the SSC says, in the next few months.
Dr Coleman repeated it's the Commission's report, sparking the question, had he seen a version of it?
I'm aware of a draft copy of the report, but it's far from complete, and it would be very premature actually to waste time on this before the report has been finalised. As the State Service Commissioner says, actually it's months away, and the important thing is it's his report to release.
Dr Clark wasn't giving up.
Does he expect the report to paint a picture of performance at his ministry that he will be proud of?
So hopeless. The Honourable Dr John. The story with these PIF reviews is they're all about looking for areas to improve right across government departments, Would be no point doing it if it was a rubber stamping exercise.
But Dr Coleman left open the possibility there could be criticism of the ministry's leadership when the document surfaces later this year.
I expect there'll be a range of constructive suggestions there by which the Ministry of Health can raise its performance. Otherwise, what would be the point of doing it?
Peter Hughes also said today that he was disappointed the ministry error had occurred, but the ministry's head, Chai Chua, had fronted up and was working hard to fix it. He added he supported him in the steps he was taking. For Checkpoint, Karen Brown.
The State Department is calling on North Korea to immediately release 3 US citizens being held there in the wake of Otto Warmbier's death. The American student was flown back to the US last week in a comatose state after spending 17 months in detention in North Korea. Reining in or punishing North Korea is high on President Donald Trump's agenda, and he now has publicly cast doubt on the ability of China to mediate with North Korea over its nuclear program. All of this just a day before a planned strategic meeting between the US and China. The ABC's Thomas Oretti has this report.
A day after Otto Warmbier's death, US President Donald Trump has spoken to the 22-year-old's family.
It's a total disgrace what happened to Otto. That should never, ever be allowed to happen. And frankly, if he were brought home sooner, I think the result would have been a lot different. He should have been brought home that same day.
Speculation is mounting about the president's next move. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer.
The president has spoken very clearly about how he, the First Lady, and our country feels about the loss of this American. And obviously, when you look at how he was handled, it's something that we will continue to apply economic and political pressure and try to continue to work with our allies. We've had, I think, positive movement on China over the past 5 months of this administration, and we'll continue to work with them and others to put the appropriate pressure on North Korea to change this behavior and this regime.
As North Korea's key ally, China's involvement is critical if the United States wants to toughen international sanctions. And Otto Warmbier's death comes after months of negotiations between the US and China to rein in the rogue state's nuclear program. Sean Spicer was adamant that progress had been made.
Obviously, China can play, has played and can continue to play a greater role in helping to resolve this situation. And we will continue to hopefully build on the relationship and the dialogue that we've had with China. I think there have been some positive steps that they've taken, both at the UN and economically, to help strengthen the case against North Korea.
But in a tweet, President Trump appears to have expressed his doubts about China's role in pressuring North Korea.
While I greatly appreciate the efforts of President Xi and China to help with North Korea, it has not worked out. At least I know China tried.
China has indicated its willingness to participate in future talks. Geng Shuang is a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman.
Our position is consistent and very clear. We currently are maintaining constant communication with all sides and encouraging them to return to talks as soon as possible and work hard to advance consultations to promptly solve the nuclear issue on the Korean Peninsula.
And as the investigation continues into Otto Warmbier, South Korea's new president, Moon Jae-in, has weighed into the speculation surrounding how the American student died. He says it's clear North Korea had a heavy responsibility in the case, and at the request of the student's family, there won't be an autopsy.
That report from the ABC. The Lions 34, the Chiefs 6. The Lions 32, the Māori 10. After starting the tour like a hibernating bear, the Lions are starting to look like a team that knows what it takes to win rugby games in New Zealand. Can they do it in the first test against the All Blacks on Saturday night? Now, when the Lions come to our shores, you don't just get the best rugby players from England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales. You get the best rugby journalists too. Among them, the BBC's Chris Jones. One of the ironies of British rugby is that its scribes are expressive in ways their players sometimes aren't. But by closing the Crusaders, Māori and Chiefs down, by playing tight, taciturn rugby, the Lions have also been winning, and winning is what they're here to do.
I think that's 100% what it is, and this is why the great imponderable about this weekend is whether the All Blacks can be shut down in the way the Maori and the Crusaders were shut down, because we know that the All Blacks are human. And that you can speak to people in the game, and they actually feel that over the past few years, maybe it's the weakness of England, maybe it's the weakness of Australia or South Africa, but that there is a lobby that thinks that the All Blacks haven't quite been challenged to the extent they could have been. And we perhaps haven't seen the All Blacks put under that serious amount of pressure. Clearly they were in World Cups in 2011 and 2015. That semi-final against South Africa especially springs to mind. But they almost won that World Cup a little bit out of canter in the final. They were better than Australia by a long shot. They were better than France so much in the quarterfinals. And so I think what Warren Gatland and Lions supporters will be hoping is that the Lions can put them under a degree of pressure and scrutiny in certain areas of their game they just don't get on a weekly basis, either internationally or in their club game. It might not be enough. Look, it probably won't be enough. The All Blacks are a sublime attacking machine. But the positive or the reasons for encouragement from a Lions point of view are that what they did to a Crusaders team that we spent all week talking up, John. We spent all week going, look at this Crusaders team. They've got a great touch vibe. They've got backs to die for. The Maori, look at Nihi Milner-Skada. They've got Charlie Nathai. They've got Damien McKenzie. The list went on, and then nothing happened. The Lions just completely nullified them. So I think this is, for all the talk, and that I know that some New Zealand fans and New Zealand journalists aren't too happy about the style of play the Lions have been exhibiting. But they're not just going to come and try and match New Zealand at their own game. They've got to bring something the All Blacks don't get on a regular basis. And that's what I think makes this series at the moment so compelling, so exciting, such a level of anticipation, because we just don't know how the All Blacks will stand up to that scrutiny, if the Lions can put any other layers on their game. And this great clash of contrast we're going to get in Eden Park, I think, is what actually quite a few rugby fans quite want to see.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's utterly disingenuous of New Zealand to suggest that you should come here, travel to the other side of the world, play on our grounds and play our style of rugby. Why would you want to? I mean, you have to play to your strengths, right? And what I saw in Rotorua on Saturday night was that your strengths were just suffocating the sense of possibility and potential out of the Māori side, who by the end of the game were looking like they actually were hoping someone would call it off early. That's Gatland's plan. I guess the fascinating thing is Hansen knows that now, right? So this is a chess game, isn't it?
It is, and it's been a chess game being played by the two of them in the media as well. Hansen certainly got the upper hand last week when he almost broke a story on behalf of the UK and Irish press by saying that that the Lions were calling out 5 or 6 new recruits. And even though a few of us had heard whispers about that, we certainly hadn't gone on air or to print with it. So Hansen got in there first. I mean, he's got a job in journalism if it all goes wrong on the coaching front. And so Gatland was put on the back foot by that. Then Gatland's come out and said, the New Zealanders used this illegal tactic and that illegal tactic. So the two of them have been playing a little bit of a game in the media. But, ultimately the game will be won and lost come the 80 minutes on Saturday and the other 2 test matches. And I think this is where it's the greatest challenge, certainly of Gatland's coaching career. And you could argue Hansen's as well, because if Hansen can add a Lions Tour victory to a World Cup as a head coach, a World Cup as an assistant coach, that would put him into the stratosphere of the great coaches if he isn't there already. While Gatland, who has been a bit up and down in the eyes of some of us in the Northern Hemisphere, his Wales team perhaps hasn't kicked on the way it could have done in the past couple of years, but he pulled it out the bag at the last few World Cups and manufactured some brilliant wins. He took the Lions down to Australia and won. And if he can compete down here, then it really would cement his place as a top-quality coach as well. So I think even the coaches are a fascinating subplot. So are the game plans, so are the players, so are the fans. It's all building up very, very nicely. Yeah, it's so exciting. What a wonderful game it's going to be. Let's end on that game. And you're so respectful and deferential, you English journalists, about New Zealand rugby. So don't be. Hit us with your best shot. Can the Lions win on Saturday night? You asked me this question I left the Blues game here in Auckland on the first midweek game. It's only about a week into the tour. And I remember speaking to my family at home, and my dad's a Welshman and a mad keen rugby fan. And I remember being really downbeat because the Lions had lost, the Crusaders were coming up, then it was the Highlanders, then it was the Maori. And I remember saying to them, this is going to be a tour from hell. This could just go so badly. But the fact the Lions rallied to beat the Crusaders, beat the Chiefs last night, smashed the Maori, I just think they deserve a huge amount of credit, and it starts with Warren Gatland. So it's a long way round of me saying, if you'd asked me a couple of weeks ago, no chance. But going into Saturday, I give the Lions a 30% shot, and I think a 30% shot is a lot more than a lot of Lions fans would have thought perhaps a month ago.
The BBC's Chris Jones talking about what looks like it might be a pretty fantastic test match at Eden Park. The first test match, Lions All Blacks, Saturday night. A lot of feedback tonight. Thank you. Kia ora, John. Todd Barclay has admitted publicly taping others. Why is he allowed to work through into an election? And does Bill English think it's fine to keep someone as an MP who knew he had undertaken illegal activity as long as the public didn't know? Asked Doug. John, if Todd Barclay is resigning, why doesn't he go now? Asked Bill. A lot of people are asking that, including AJM from Palmerston North, who says Barclay is not gone by lunchtime, as you proclaim. Have a look in the House anytime between now and the election. You will see him still on the roll. Gone by November is more like. Todd didn't resign because he did something wrong. He's standing down because he got caught, says Jay. And Bill in the end has sent us a long email saying, "Hi John, I've watched this story unfold and am incredulous the National Party selected Barclay as its MP." But what Bill wants to know is that Barclay didn't cooperate and was not interviewed by the police over the serious criminal matter of recording his electorate agents' phone conversations. Can the police be asked to comment on this? Asked Bill. Bill, we have asked them repeatedly and we will keep doing so. Thank you for your feedback.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The Prime Minister says he did not ask Todd Barclay to resign from Parliament or talk to him about pulling his candidacy for the 2017 election. The first-term Balclutha Southland MP has been put under pressure to resign over secret recordings he's accused of making of an electorate staff member. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
The long-serving electorate staffer Glenys Dixon resigned last year and received a payout as part of a confidentiality agreement. Yesterday, Todd Barclay contradicted the Prime Minister when they were both asked about secret recordings. Mr Barclay later apologised for making misleading statements, but this afternoon he took a step further and announced he would leave Parliament at the election. Bill English says Todd Barclay has made the right decision. A new candidate for Balclutha Southland will now have to be chosen in the run-up to September. Atuiti whare pārimata ko Chris Bramwell aho.
The Gore Mayor says the resignation of Southland Balclutha MP Todd Barclay is sad for the community, the MP and for elected officials around the country. She says problems at the electorate office have been bubbling away in the district for some time and is saddened by the latest developments.
Sad on a number of fronts, really. It's sad from a community perspective in Gore and surrounding areas, but it's also sad for Todd on a personal front. It's sad for elected representatives in the country.
Tracy Hicks says Todd Barclay has done some good work in his time as the local MP. Staff are being moved out of Napier's Civic Building and Library immediately after earthquake tests revealed the buildings are unsafe. The Napier City Council says it was presented with seismic tests this week, showing that both buildings have structural problems. Engineers have found the buildings have a seismic rating of 10% of a 1 in 1,000 year quake. It says the Civic Building, which includes the Council's chambers and Mayor's office, is unlikely to be fixed or refurbished. The Library Building, which also includes the Inland Revenue Department branch, will be strengthened. The Council's Chief Executive, Wayne Jack, says they're choosing to move people out today because their comfort is a priority. Staff will work remotely from nearby offices and other council buildings, and the council is discussing new sites with commercial landlords. The Education Ministry has been told to apologise for failures in its handling of school closures and mergers in the wake of the 2011 Canterbury earthquake. The Chief Ombudsman recommended the apology in a critical report tabled in Parliament this afternoon. The report says the Ministry consulted schools over broad plans for the future of education in Christchurch, but at the same time ran a secret program with specific plans for individual schools. The Ministry's Chief Executive, Iona Halstead, says the Ministry let people down and it's sorry. She says the Ministry didn't provide people with the information they needed, and so they were shocked and surprised when the closures and mergers were announced. The father of a man shot dead by police in Hamilton last year says while they may have been justified in shooting his son, it shouldn't have happened. 36-year-old Nicholas Marshall died at the scene after armed police raided a warehouse he was living in looking for firearms and drugs. The Independent Police Conduct Authority has found the police action was justified because they feared their lives were at risk. Nelson Marshall says the police could have visited the warehouse at any time and not left it until early evening.
Did they need to send 10 armed officers in at 6 o'clock, 6:30 at night, when he'd had the workshop open for most of the afternoon, to attack him when there's only him and his girlfriend there?
Nelson Marshall says his son thought the mongrel mob, who had had problems with in the past, had come to attack him. The Minister of Health, Jonathan Coleman, says he has confidence in the Director General of Health, Chai Chua. Earlier this month, it was revealed $38 million from the budget had been misallocated to District Health Board heads, and the Minister of Health blamed officials for the blunder. Some DHB heads have told RNZ News the relationship between them and the Health Ministry's top officials has almost completely eroded. They say it's the most fragmented and disjointed in 20 years of ministry leadership, and it's now reached a new low. Dr Coleman says tension has always existed between the ministry and DHBs.
Chai Chua has actually done a very good job around some very complex issues, and we've increased access to services across the board. So yes, I do have confidence in him. They've had some private discussions last week. I understand there's one or two disaffected people, but the majority of chairs, I think, are very focused on just getting on with the job.
The Minister of Health, Jonathan Coleman. It's 6:05. In sport, the New South Wales Rugby League coach Laurie Daly is expecting a far better performance from Queensland in the State of Origin 2 in Sydney tonight. The Blues are 1-0 up in the series and hoping to secure just their second series win in 12 years. Queensland have made a number of changes from the side that lost Game 1 28-4, including the return of Jonathan Thurston and Billy Slater. Daly says the inclusion of those two stars will help the Maroons.
They're a stronger team because of that, just with their own ability, but also their ability to lift other people. So, and they've got some young, enthusiastic forwards, and they've got more leg speed through the middle, and it's going to be a tough night of footy.
Laurie Daly. Meanwhile, the New Zealand Rugby League chairman, Gary Fissenden, has resigned after 3 years in the job. Fissenden and fellow board member Tim Gibson resigned at today's board meeting. Former Canterbury chairman Rion Edwards has been appointed interim chairman, while New Zealand Rugby League finds 2 replacements for the board. And it's do or die for the Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic tonight when they face the Northern Stars in their final round-robin netball match of the domestic competition. The Magic need to win by at least 15 goals to pip the Northern Mystics for the third and final playoff spot. The Magic or Mystics will play the Central Pulse this weekend, with the winner of that game will play the Southern Steel in next week's grand final. Centre passes at 7:40. That's the news.
Did the National Party obstruct justice?
Trying to get someone to drop their case to not bring a complaint to the police is enough to be obstruction of justice in itself.
A minister laments the fallout.
It's actually quite hurtful in the sense of good people but have fallen out, and that now playing out in the public arena.
And do politicians lie?
Perhaps to save face out of a sense of conceit, ego, vanity, whatever, they will be less than forthcoming with the truth.
Straight questions and sometimes straight answers. Morning Reports with Guy Aspinall and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, what's the future for insurance when 7 out of 10 jobs in the industry are at risk from major technological disruption? And after 10, how a 70-year-old Kiwi tale of great courage and escape has been translated into Italian and turned into an historic walk with the author's son, Harry Broad. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland, Auckland and Coromandel. Showers turning to rain later today or overnight with heavy falls, northeast gales and possible thunderstorms. Rain and winds easing late tomorrow. Bay of Plenty in Gisborne, a few showers today, turning to rain tomorrow with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms. Waikato to Taranaki and Taupo, cloud spreading south today and rain developing tomorrow. Whanganui to Wellington, also Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Marlborough. Fine today with high cloud later, rain spreading south tomorrow. Nelson and Bulla, cloud increasing today and scattered rain developing tomorrow. Westland and Fiordland, rain with heavy falls clearing tomorrow. Canterbury to Southland, high cloud. Rain developing late today, easing to isolated showers in the south tomorrow, and snow lowering to 600 metres. The Chatham Islands cloudy with drizzle tomorrow. It's 6:08, and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. The country's youngest MP, Todd Barclay, has fallen on his sword. Although as many of you are pointing out, it's going in rather slowly because he's hanging around until the election. The Balclutha South MP will stand down at the election after revelations over secret recording he is accused of making of a staffer in his Gore electorate office. I think accused is a polite turn. I don't think that fact's in dispute. The 27-year-old has denied making the recording, but yesterday Bill English produced a statement he made to police saying Mr Barclay had personally told him he'd left a dictaphone in the office. The staffer, Glenys Dixon, resigned last year and received a payout as part of a confidentiality agreement. Prime Minister Bill English fronted up to media this afternoon and was asked what Todd Barclay had done differently in the past 24 hours to merit his resignation.
What's different is, I think, the statement yesterday morning, which Todd acknowledged himself was untrue, and secondly, his understanding of the whole situation and how it was affecting him and his credibility and his prospects. So he's made, I think, a very difficult decision for a young politician, but it's the right one.
If you were watching that, you would have seen Jane Patterson standing behind Bill English as he was talking. Well, she's standing in front of our camera now, joining us via live view from our gallery office. Hi again, Jane. It's lovely to have you back. This time last night, we were discussing what really was a most bizarre media stand-up from Todd Barclay, where he wandered in, delivered a very qualified and rather meek apology and wandered off. Tonight, we are discussing his resignation. What's changed in the interim?
I think there was a real sense of inevitability today as everyone arrived at Parliament. We talked to MPs coming in, and there were a few loyal friends who were saying, yeah, he's a great guy, he's doing a great job, but really a lot of MPs keeping their heads down and not a lot of enthusiastic support for him. No. As the morning drew on, it really had the feeling of people making discussions, meeting about what was going to be happening, and we started to get signals that he was probably having those talks with senior National Party members, and of course then we had the announcement that he wouldn't stand down until he would stand down at the election. But I still think that an immediate resignation in these circumstances would have been justified. He does get to stay on now for another 3 months or so, taking the parliamentary salary when there are still major questions around his actions.
Yes, and certainly we're receiving an enormous number of emails and texts saying precisely that too. Let's set aside Todd Barclay because he's setting himself aside effectively, although, as you say, not for some time. But how damaging has this been for Bill English as both Prime Minister, where trust is so important, and as National Party leader?
Look, I think a big shadow has been cast over the leadership of Bill English over the last couple of days, and he's going to have to really work hard to rectify that in the months before the election. He has been put right in the middle of this story, mainly because of his position as a former electorate MP, of course the electorate that Todd Barclay took over. So he was drawn into this a little bit, but regardless, he is now responding to accusations that he's been involved in a cover-up, saying, I'm not in a cover-up, I reported it to party officials, I reported it to the police, and that's where it lay. But still, Todd Barclay has remained in Parliament with these questions over his head, with Bill English and John Campbell, who presumably knew about it as well, having signed off on the Leader's budget, keeping him in Parliament as a member of the caucus.
Yeah. Let's go to the Balclutha Southland electorate, which, as you say, is Bill English's old electorate. What impact, if any, is this going to have in this profoundly, singularly safe national seat?
I think now that Todd Barclay is no longer going to be the candidate, that probably has fixed that situation somewhat if they can get a good replacement candidate in. It's still not exactly clear about what happens about reselection, but the party rules say that there does have to be a reselection. If this had happened within 2 months of the general election, there'd be a truncated process, but the board does have quite a lot of discretion to carry out a new reselection process, and given the proximity to the election, that may be done pretty quickly. There are some candidates around, Mr Flood, who'd come second to Todd Barclay. He may well put his hand in the ring. It may be a relatively straightforward process, but the party rules do require them to go through that selection process again.
So it'll be a fascinating business. Jane Patterson, our political editor, thank you so much, Jane. We appreciate your time last night and tonight in Todd Barclay's Balclutha Southland electorate. This is New Zealand's largest non-Māori electorate. There was surprise and disappointment at his decision to quit, as well as people saying to us earlier it was the right thing to do. But our Otago Southland reporter Ian Telfer has been talking to people.
The country's youngest MP was elected at the age of 24, but 3 years later it's all come crashing down. There was sympathy in Gore today for Todd Barclay, but many thought he'd done the right thing falling on his sword.
I think that's been a good decision. It's a wise decision, but I feel very sorry for him. He had such a promising career, and that happened, just a small thing like that. And I feel very sorry for all the people involved.
I think it's a good thing. What he's done is wrong. And he's got to he's got to be liable for what he's done. But lying to the Prime Minister don't help either. So, but mind you, Bill English needs to pull his finger out as well.
I do feel sorry for him, because he could be just doing what he was told to do. But on the other side of the coin, enough poop seems to stick to the National Party and they get away with it.
Long-time Balclutha District Councillor Gaynor Finch from Milton says she's stunned by the scandal.
Until it came out in the media yesterday, I hadn't even heard a whiff of what was going on, so for it to have gone on so long and for there to have been so many denials and things about it and it been hidden for so long, that was a bit of a shock.
Do you think he made the right decision, though, going at this point?
Yes, I think so. For his sake, I think he'd know the writing's on the wall, and once you deny something and the Prime Minister comes out and says the exact opposite, then I don't think you've got a hope of changing the outcome.
The Mayor of Gore District, Tracy Hicks, where Mr Barclay hails from, says he's done good work as an MP and the past year's events are very sad.
Sad from a community perspective in Gore and surrounding areas, but it's also sad for Todd on a personal front. It's sad for elected representatives in the country, but I think that the tack that's been taken, and I'm only picking this up secondhand now, the right thing has occurred, and we can move on.
But others feel Mr Barclay deserved another chance. Queenstown Bay resident Evan Jenkins says he was very surprised the MP's resigning.
I've met Todd a few times, and he's energised young man, and he's put in a big effort into this area and its issues, both positive and not so positive. And I think he's doing his best, and he's doing pretty good. And it seems to me that he's slipped on a banana skin and he's lost a career and a job, and that seems pretty harsh to me.
Mr Jenkins says Todd Barclay might have just laid low for a while, waited for it to blow over, and then let voters decide if he should stay or go at the next election. But the Balclutha councillor Gaynor Finch says a friend remarked today she would not be voting for Mr Barclay because of the scandal, and that view was probably widespread.
We all make mistakes. Nobody's above being human and making mistakes, but you've got to learn from it and then admit that you made a mistake, and then you can go from there. But to deny it all the time, I think that's a completely different story.
Gaynor Finch says Mr Barclay's been a hard-working MP, but has now learned a hard life lesson about trust. For Checkpoint, Ian Telfer.
It's 17 minutes past 6. It could have been yet another deadly terror attack, but authorities in Belgium say soldiers today foiled a terror incident in the heart of the capital. A suspected suicide bomber was shot dead at the main train station in Brussels after he apparently set off a small explosion. No one else was injured, but the incident has once again jangled nerves, of course, in a city where last March suicide bombers killed 32 people on the Brussels subway and at the city's airport. Here's the BBC's Frankie McCamlin.
Brussels Central Station evacuated shortly after police say a man triggered a small explosion. Eyewitnesses say they heard gunfire and multiple explosions. Just minutes later, smoke can be seen inside. As the station was evacuated, flames were caught on camera inside.
I went down the stairs to go back to the platform where I had to go, and there I heard someone shouting, and then at one point he shouted Allahu Akbar and blew up the suitcase he had. I just carried on down trying to get as many people to evacuate as possible, and there he was just behind me, 2 meters away from the stairs, and he still had the belt on him.
Outside, moved back by police officers, people gathered together, making their way to safety, trying to come to terms with yet another attack in the city.
We heard an explosion. My colleague started shouting, "It is a bomb, it is a bomb." I saw the man, he came towards me, so I started panicking. But luckily, he turned around and went away.
The country's military, already on high alert, were on the scene within minutes, shooting dead the suspect. Bomb disposal units were also sent in to make sure the area was safe. Belgian prosecutors now say this is being treated as a terrorist attack.
About 8:30 there has been an explosion in Central Station here in Brussels. The suspect has been neutralized by the military that were present at the scene immediately after the explosion. There were no other victims. This incident is considered as a terrorist attack.
The attack follows a series of attacks last year when 3 suicide bombers targeted the city's airport and an underground station, an area popular with tourists enjoying the evening sunshine, now on edge, surrounded by police and military personnel.
Frankie McHamlin from the BBC with that report. Well, Auckland is New Zealand's biggest city. Of course, 1 in 3 New Zealanders live somewhere in Auckland, but you don't have to go very far to find cows and sheep, funnily enough. Early today, the Building and Construction Minister, Nick Smith, told RNZ there was no place for grazing cows in an Auckland reserve when there is a massive housing shortage. Now, he was referring to an amendment he's making to ban farming or grazing on the Point England Reserve, part of which has been earmarked for a new housing development. And that left us wondering just how many cows are there around Auckland. We sent our intrepid reporter, Sarah Robson, to find out.
Cornwall Park is just 8 kilometres from Auckland CBD, a quick 10-minute or so drive when the traffic's clear. Surrounded by houses, it's home to flocks of sheep and a herd of cattle. A park in the middle of New Zealand's biggest city isn't the first place you'd expect to find hundreds of farm animals. But the locals love it.
It just brings the country into the city. Where else in the world can you find this? It's lovely, it's just great to see. Daffodils, lambs.
Children in the city don't get a lot of opportunity to see farm animals, and so it's really nice. And you also see the seasonal changes with the cows having their calves, and we're just off to go and see the little lambs now. Hopefully there's some there.
I think it's a good advertisement when we have all the tourists come here, and they seem to love them and they take photos of them. They don't have that close proximity, I don't think, to those sort of animals in their own countries.
The farm manager, Peter Maxwell, says the livestock graze over 150 hectares of land across both Cornwall Park and One Tree Hill Domain.
We have 600 Perrendale ewes and 60 Simmental cows that are all about to calve and lamb through August and September.
Cornwall Park was gifted to New Zealanders by Sir John Logan Campbell over 100 years ago. It's now run by the Cornwall Park Trust. Peter Maxwell says having agriculture in and around the urban environment was part of Sir John's vision.
Also part of the grass control, the economic way of controlling grass in the hillier aspects for our sheep. And people do like to come to the park and see the cows and calves and the ewes and lambs grazing around.
But the Cornwall Park Trust isn't the only one farming around Auckland. Mark Bowater, who's the head of park services for Auckland Council, says it's got livestock grazing across a number of its regional parks. About 19 of them are farmed in one way or another. There are also another dozen parks that have grazing licences.
So across the regional parks network of 28 regional parks, we have around 5,500 sheep and around 1,100 head of cattle. It does fluctuate a little bit according to season.
Mark Bowater says education is part of the reason why the council does have livestock at many of its parks.
Particularly children from areas where they may not be able to travel out to regional parks. So the opportunity is there for them to be able to connect with nature, with animals, see them in a working farm environment, understand where our milk comes from, where wool comes from.
And Mark Bowater says as Auckland grows and becomes more urban, those experiences will become all the more important. I tamaki makoto mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
Cornwall Park really is rather wonderful if you've never visited it. It's about 6:23. Oracle Team USA will be hoping history repeats with 3 days to go until racing resumes against Team New Zealand in the America's Cup final. Most of the action is taking place in the boat sheds, with speculation rife that Oracle will have some new tricks in its bag when it hits the water on Sunday morning New Zealand time. But under the rules, Oracle can't put a new boat on the water. It can make modifications, but even they are prescribed. So how can they make their cat go faster in 3 days? Because if they can't, they're going to lose. I asked NBC race commentator Todd Harris.
You know what? I think there's a lot of things they can try to do. On American television, I have Nathan Outteridge and Chris Draper as my television co-partners. And I said, guys, can you really get that much done in 5 days? And they said there's minor incremental gains they can make. But they said they need to make some major gains, because the way it is right now, Peter Burling and Emirates Team New Zealand is just putting what we call a beat down on them here in Bermuda. They just do not have an answer. And what's amazing to all of us is the defenders of the Cup have not led one race so far in the America's Cup final.
So we in New Zealand, of course, all remember back to San Francisco, Team New Zealand up 8-1. New Zealand took what was in hindsight a really ill-advised day off. Spittle and Oracle are tweaking like crazy. They come out with a boat that is just a completely different craft, and they go from 8-1 down to win 9-8. This isn't the same kind of race, is it? You can't make such dramatic changes this time round, can you?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I could be wrong, John, but to be honest with you, I think the Americans came into this with a pretty fast boat as it was, but I think they've just gone up against an opponent who's just faster, and everyone thought that they were fast. Everyone knew the Kiwis are fast, but I think it's the way they're sailing so precise. They make an error every now and then. Everyone does, but it's not errors that are costing them races. And Pete Burling, bless his heart, I mean, the guy's got ice in his veins. He does not make mistakes that rattle him. I mean, when he does make a mistake, he quickly gets on about his business and he gets back to sailing. You know, we've seen a couple times where they let the Americans get back in the race, close it down to maybe less than 100 meters. And then he's off and sailing. And what's so amazing about all this is he's doing this in the lead. You know, we saw him in the Challenger final facing off against Nathan Outteridge and Artemis of Sweden, and he was behind many times, but he found a way to put the pressure on the Swedes and force them into errors, and then he would pass them. He hasn't had to do that yet against a guy of Jimmy Spithill's caliber. It just hasn't been a contest.
Yeah, so you've got Nathan Outteridge on your commentary team. What's he saying about Team New Zealand? Is he feeling like they're 3-zip up, right? So they only have to win 4 races. Spittle and Oracle have to win 7 now. Is Outteridge thinking that Team New Zealand are really going to be tough to beat?
I think Nathan believes that. You know, I talked to him prior to us going on with the finals after they were eliminated, and I said, you know, best boat out here. He said, fastest boat out here without question, the Kiwis. And he said, if they race today, I think the Kiwis beat Americans 7-2. And this was, you know, a week or so ago, and I don't know if he would stick with that. He might say the Kiwis are going to beat the Americans 7-love, because the way they're racing, it's just no contest right now. And I don't see Pete making any mistakes so drastic that the way the Americans are sailing and the speed they're sailing at which, he's going to open the door that much for them. You know, we were talking about it at dinner tonight, John, and we said, wouldn't this be amazing if the Kiwis win the 2 races this Saturday, they win the first race on Sunday, and then the last race on Sunday, when they have a chance to clinch it, the Americans win 1. Then I think you're going to get a lot of the conspiracy theorists going, oh no, we've seen this movie again. Here we go again. I don't see Pete Burling getting rattled. When they win, they're about the same, I think, heart rate as when they've lost in the past. It's just They go about their business. You know, Chris Draper had the funniest comment the other day about you good people down there. He said, that's about as emotional as they get. He goes, you got to work pretty hard to get a Kiwi to give you a high five. They just don't get that emotional about things, and that's been maybe the best asset for Peter Burling.
So Burling is sailing brilliantly, and I love your characterisation of him, and everyone in New Zealand who knows him knows you're bang on the money. He just doesn't get rattled. But also, the design team and the building team have done something magic, haven't they, with that cat?
Well, I think if it comes to fruition and the Kiwis win this thing, I think everyone's going to look back and go, they're geniuses, because they were the last ones to come to Bermuda. So, you know, everyone has spies out there. They're spying on them down in Auckland, but they were the last ones to come up here, and they bring those cyclors. And I think initially people thought, oh, this is a gimmick thing. This is this. But you know what? As a cyclist myself, I know I can generate a lot more power with my legs than I can with my arms. And I just think the way that team works with Glenn Ashby, with Blair Tuke, with the Brain Trust, working with Peter Burling, they're just so smooth. They just aren't making major mistakes. Yeah, they've had some bad jibes. Yeah, they've had some odd timing on some of their tacks. But for the most part, they're doing everything they have to do, and you look at the distance that they're winning by. These aren't winning by 8, 10, 15, 20 seconds. We're talking 45, 50, over a minute. So as you know, John, this in sailing, that's a blowout.
Yeah, that is the NBC's racing commentator. I spoke to him afterwards. We were having a bit of a chat, and I said, really, you know, are you really that confident on Team New Zealand's behalf? And he is not convinced Oracle can find the speed they don't have to beat Team New Zealand. But I'm sure we all felt the same way in San Francisco, didn't we? 8-1 up. Goodness gracious me. Anyway, that's Sunday morning. The Lions All Blacks Saturday night. If you are sports inclined, hands up, John Campbell. It is a very exciting weekend ahead. That's Checkpoint for tonight. Thank you so much for being with us. On behalf of our really excellent team, let's have a shot of them in the control room. Look, there they are. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Prime Minister insists he did not ask Todd Barclay to resign from Parliament. The Health Minister is backing his Chief Executive, despite him being under attack over a budget blunder. Canterbury principals say an apology for the ministry's mishandling of school closures comes too late. Nearly 300 workers are being moved out of Napier's civic building and library because earthquake tests show the buildings are unsafe. And emergency services are hailing a pilot who safely landed a helicopter after it caught fire in mid-air. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Solo father Warren shares regrets.
JP was the oldest and the one that was most devastated, absolutely devastated, and would often plea with both of us to actually to reconcile.
Plead with you?
Oh yeah, to reconcile.
True stories of what it takes to raise children on your own in New Zealand. Flying solo.